Downtown's dramatic transformation continues at a remarkable rate. Gentrification has brought hip new cafes, bars, and restaurants to old neighborhoods, and luxury housing has raised rents and property values across the board down here.
New development and construction is everywhere around Richmond. I came to the city to attend Virginia Commonwealth University, School of the Arts, but grew up in New Jersey. It's said that VCU has redeveloped the city and attracted prospective students from everywhere like myself. There are many other schools in Richmond, including University of Richmond, that also bring in people. I came to VCU because of the city atmosphere and diversity here in Richmond. Just being here for a year, I have seen a lot of buildings go up and different areas change. I never really thought about how these changes might affect the community. Redevelopment means change, and this must affect long-term residents. Do they have any control? Who is really benefiting from these changes in the city? Is this redevelopment helping or hurting lower-income residents? I was attracted to these new buildings and shopping centers when I first came here, and I'm sure other visitors are as well. New residents are not thinking about the community, but I think they would address the issue if brought to their attention. Many people in Richmond don't even know the term gentrification, and it is happening in their city. It is easy to ignore because it happens over a long period of time and is a slow process. This city holds a majority of poverty in the state, and these residents must be affected by these changes in the community. After staying in VCU's freshman dormitory, I recognized the vast income inequality within the community and city. Walking through Monroe Park to class every day, I saw a lot of homeless people in the park and recognized the problem was only getting worse and more people were being displaced. And after more exploring the city of Richmond, I learned that there's a lot more communities other than the new trendy downtown and the Fan. And these are low-income areas that have not changed for a long time. Although gentrification has economic advantages for the city of Richmond, it has also caused significant problems with affordable housing, income gap, and cultural change for the lower-income communities. If you didn't already know, gentrification is defined by Madeline J. Barron, graduate from Georgetown University in Public Policy, as the process of change that occurs in a neighborhood, including economic development and the displacement of lower-income residents with higher-income residents. It is such a controversial topic because, in a sense, gentrification is making cities, specifically Richmond, better, but at the same time causing direct effects on lower-income residents. Gentrification has caused housing values and rent to substantially increase in the Richmond area, and lower-income residents are having trouble maintaining their homes and lifestyle. Rent and housing income are two leading indicators of gentrification. Prices increasing shows the second phase of gentrification, after government intervention, property investment, and new residents moving in. Richmond has had a serious gap in availability of affordable housing for moderate and low-income residents, and gentrification is only making it worse. As Richmond rejuvenates and more high-income households move in, housing values rise. While rising home values could potentially benefit low-income residents who decide to sell, many low-income households rent rather than own their homes and may see higher taxes with increased home values. This is the same for rental costs, as landlords encounter new residents who are willing to pay a higher market rate for housing than current residents. Rental prices may increase rapidly. City data reported a wide variety of facts on the city of Richmond and estimated the median house value in 2013 was $189,200, but in 2000 it was estimated at $87,400. In the past 5 years, housing costs have increased by as much as 68% in parts of the region. Gentrification has also affected the availability and affordability of subsidized housing programs. Various policies in place to maintain adequate and affordable low-income housing in response to the new development come with lots of limitations. According to Madeline J. Barron, a graduate from Georgetown University in Public Policy, in a gentrifying neighborhood with rising land values and housing costs, residents in subsidized housing may be vulnerable to rising rents or declining availability due to eviction, demolition, or apartment conversion. Barron merged data from the Department of Housing and Urban Development and Census Bureau's American Community Survey for a study to compare the availability for subsidized housing to the level of gentrification in that neighborhood, and found that the association between high gentrification and a total number of subsidized units is meaningful. The results concluded that gentrified areas would have less availability in public housing units, and these public housing projects would experience the rising costs of gentrification. Lower income residents may or may not appreciate the new amenities, businesses, and redevelopment in their communities, but the effect this process has on the availability and affordability of housing for them is often negative. The third phase of gentrification captures this displacement. For people already living in these gentrifying communities, the possibility of being priced out of their homes becomes a real concern. Rapidly rising rents push even modest accommodations out of reach for low-income renters, while rising home values increase property taxes that become burdensome to low-income homeowners. 2009, the Institute for Children in Poverty examined the gentrification in 5 neighborhoods in New York and reported that though several studies suggest that low-income residents are not experiencing massive displacement because of gentrification, but actually benefit from the influx of the capital to the area. They neglect those individuals and families who are already precariously housed, who face eviction or reside doubled up with friends or relatives and live on the brink of homelessness. Gentrification has caused a huge gap in income inequality between residents in Richmond, isolating the poor and adding new transformations for the wealthier residents moving in. Mindy Alt, a research assistant at NHC's Center for Housing Policy, says this correlates with the vast majority of extremely low-income households having severe housing cost burdens. These households include many workers who serve local communities in minimum wage positions. Nearly 8 in 10 extremely low-income working households were severely housing cost burdened in 2013. Huge percentage difference between 78.9% of extremely low-income households having severe housing cost burdens to 30.6% of moderate income households. The lower income residents are struggling the most, yet are being hit the hardest with housing costs. Meanwhile, these new wealthier residents are moving into the new gentrified spots in Richmond and causing housing values to skyrocket and making the median income increase as well. In a podcast by NPR News called Gentrification, Progress or Destruction, Lisa Sturdivant states income is the real driver of gentrification. Lower-income residents feel like new investors and these new homeowners are leaving them out or in some cases pushing them out of an improving economic picture. City data reported a wide variety of facts on the city of Richmond and estimated the median household income in 2013 was $39,193, but over 18% of households earn less than $15,000 in income. This correlates with housing values and rent skyrocketing because wealthier residents are moving in, causing the median income to increase. While new transformations are happening in spots of Richmond, the East End specifically still holds most of the city's public housing projects. This is concentrated poverty. Tina Grego, a reporter at Washington Post, states Creighton Court, just 15 minutes away from here, is the best example of showing the gap in income and living within the city. Creighton Court is the poorest census tract in the city, with a poverty rate of 69.6% and an unemployment rate of 22.7%. Most residents are women and kids, and they live on average annual incomes of roughly $8,500 a year. These extremely low-income residents cannot afford these new transformations in their neighborhood, and that's why there is more displacement happening. Gentrification is also causing inequality between homeowners and renters, specifically affecting lower-income neighborhoods the hardest with housing costs. Rising rent is so significant to lower-income homeowners because a large majority of these residents rent instead of own their homes. Mindy Alt, in her research for housing policy, says in fact renters face steady rise in housing costs, while owners have benefited from falling housing costs. These lower-income renters are being hit the hardest with housing costs. This creates a very unequal relationship between homeowners and renters. This is very significant because between 2010 and 2013, the number of working owners decreased by more than 4%, while the number of working renters increased by 5.6% during that time. Here, Richmond is taking advantage of home renters and challenging affordable housing for a large group of residents. Gentrification, rising rents, limited or declining supply of affordable homes, and flat or declining incomes all come together to paint a troubling picture of the housing situation of many low-income households. While new groups of people are moving into the gentrified areas of Richmond, the city neglects opportunity and culture for the lower-income communities. Gentrification is causing extremely low-income neighborhoods to remain and continue to live in poverty. Tina Grego included the Map of Opportunity, a project done by Koziol, the Director of Research for Housing Opportunities Made Equal of Virginia, Inc., which includes a map showing which neighborhoods in Richmond best position the residents for future opportunity. These maps show the areas of low opportunity correlate with the areas of high poverty. This hints that gentrification is part of a racial issue. Change in the racial composition of a neighborhood frequently accompanies the gentrification process. The Institute for Child and Poverty, an independent nonprofit research that studies the impact of poverty on family and child well-being, says often higher income households of one ethnic or racial background move into lower income neighborhoods populated by another group. An influx of white population has occurred in the gentrified areas of Richmond. Education is another indicator of gentrification, in which these newest in-movers often have higher levels of education than the current residents of a neighborhood. These new residents come in with higher income and education level and bring a different culture and contrast to older Richmond residents. Lower income communities in Richmond do not have a good school system, but the city is trying to restructure into smaller schools and attract higher income movers. Long-term residents have been used to the culture and look of their community, and these new movers bring in more restaurants, stores, and small coffee shops. These long-term residents have no control. Overall, Richmond has been such a selling point for movers because of its convenient location to education, transportation, food, and attractions. This research process has really brought attention to the negative effects of gentrification, as well as the difficulty in making the redevelopment positive for everyone. Gentrification cannot completely be stopped in Richmond, but at least everyone should be profiting. For example, offering more public subsidized housing to keep up with the new development. Also, control rent tax and making sure the wealthier residents and cities are not taking advantage of lower income residents. Everyone should know the term gentrification and how it is affecting the city and community. Not just the city and big communities. Local business and new opportunities can help lower income residents both in housing and job opportunity. It is important that residents and the community take a stance on gentrification before major changes occur in the city. Research has suggested that gentrification is only in its early stages. And with that, I leave the question. Are we going to keep letting lower income residents suffer? Are people going to continue to be oblivious to the negative effects of gentrification on lower income residents?